Greetings, it's time for part 4 of the summer series on existential therapy. Part 4 is about self disclosure, levels thereof, rationale behind. And I want to start with the moon. You probably learned some lies about the moon, some like really obvious lies. You probably heard that the moon comes out at night, and that's obviously not true. I mean, any even brief contemplation of celestial mechanics demonstrates that's just impossible. And half the time the moon is visible, it's in daylight. You just notice it at night because it's not competing anymore with the sun. It's visible, right? Well, the other big lie you probably heard is that the moon orbits the Earth. In fact, everything in the universe is influenced by everything else. Galaxies billions of light years away exert tiny influences on the Milky Way galaxy, for example, and us. The moon's about a quarter million miles away. It has about 1/6 of the mass of the Earth. It's so large compared to the Earth that Isaac Asimov described the moon and Earth as a binary planet. It just doesn't make much sense to describe it as a moon. The moon, but not a moon. And things with mass tug on other things. So gravity declines over the square of the distance, meaning that the tug of the moon on the Earth is quite small, but present, which you already knew because we have tides, right? Lunar tides and solar tides. Um, that all adds up to the fact that the moon does not orbit the Earth. The Earth and moon co orbit. Now, the point of that orbit is not like halfway between the Earth and the moon. It couldn't be. The moon is still only 1/6 the Earth's mass, and with distance and whatnot, it declines faster and so forth. But the moon, it's not that the moon is going around the Earth like so. It's that the point of the co-orbit is like just inside the crust of the Earth, and so they go like this, right? They co-orbit. Stick that in your head somewhere. Let that imagery just work on you for a while. Now, trust is a bridge. Trust can mean two things. We can mean it either as a noun or as a verb. It can be a thing that we have, or it can be a thing that we do. Now, the meaning of trust as a noun is a bit shallow. If you think about it for 5 seconds, it kind of disappears. Without the verb form, it's ultimately meaningless. I have trust. I have trust. In the monetary system, that means I have faith that when I accept money as a payment, I can use that money to buy things. And that's just it's a feeling. It's a feeling of security, a feeling of safety. I trust my wife. I almost never worry that she's going to kill me in my sleep. But this kind of trust, the felt sense of it, is only really meaningful in action. If I trust my wife not to kill me in my sleep, but I sleep in a separate locked room just in case, that trust is a lie. The feeling of trust has no meaning without the action of trust. And trust as a verb means that I take actions consistent with the faith that I possess. I accept cash, and then I take that cash to the store to make purchases. Trust, the noun, is earned by trust, the verb. I flip the light switch. The lights come on every time. So eventually, when the room is dark, I flip the switch. I have a headache, I take an aspirin, the pain goes away. The next time I have a headache, I take the aspirin. This can turn into a superstition. Sometimes I flip the light switch during a power outage, expecting something to happen. Like, I know, my brain knows the power is out, and that is silly, but my body doesn't know it, and automatically someone spills the salt. I'm from England, and in England, old superstitions still kind of persist. And If you spill the salt, you're expected to get some in your fingers and throw it over your left shoulder into Satan's eyes and mutter some old incantation like, devil, devil, I defy thee, and then spit or something, you know? That's a superstition. It's keeping bad luck at bay. In a world where we don't know anything, we just do the things that seem to work with no theoretical explanation of why those things would work. Sometimes we keep trusting people. When we have evidence, we should not trust them anymore. But the more we place faith in someone and the more they respond by keeping that faith, the more that we trust them. Trust then is a bridge that's built by walking on it. A bridge between two people that is never used is not a bridge at all. It's a meaningless abstraction. What trust can we place in our clients? How do we make that trust real? Let's talk about mutuality, right? In the beginning of a therapeutic relationship, it's one-sided. It should be. It's supposed to be. The client's here for a specific reason, and we attend to that reason. Usually the problem reaches some resolution, client terminates therapy. Sometimes the stated reason at the beginning isn't the real reason. The client has some concern that maybe they cannot state in words, they don't have words for, because society doesn't provide words for their concern. Or maybe they have more than this felt sense of a deeper problem, but they don't sufficiently trust the therapist such that they could raise the issue in the beginning of therapy. They don't trust the therapy itself. They've never been to therapy. They don't have expectations. They don't know how to make use of the process. Now, most therapy is 10 sessions or less. But sometime after session 10, if the client sticks around, it's not uncommon actually to hear about deeper issues. Either something the person realized along the way or something they've been holding back. Sometimes the therapy itself can cause the person to reflect on their lives, on their relationships, their selfhood, and formulate entirely new goals that they just couldn't have imagined at the beginning. Now, clients arrive in a one-down position. That is, the therapist has all of the apparent power and the client has no apparent power. They've come for expert advice, for management, to get a cure for a problem, especially in this country where we medicalize our problems of living. We, of course, can provide none of that. None of it. Over the course of weeks, one of our jobs as the therapist is to equalize the power balance or the apparent power balance. We strip the client of their delusions about what it is that we can do. We're not medics or wizards. We can't solve their problems for them. And if we could, we probably shouldn't. We can't lead them to any insight that will make sense of their universe in a fashion so meaningful that they will no longer suffer. As the person starts to lose their false perceptions, they stop handing us all of the power, all of their power, and we become more real, or at least realistic. At the same time, the person begins to realize their own power, to give up their delusions of helplessness. They grow, we shrink, until we begin to take on realistic dimensions. Real relationships are give and take. I have a friend who only wants to talk about herself. She'll politely ask about me, but I don't have much to say. I don't trust her with what my concerns might be, and she's not really listening anyway. This is a transaction. I ask you about you, then I get to tell you about me, and we do the first thing so we can get to the second thing. Not really listening. Yeah. Remember Pulp Fiction and that awkward conversation, Uma Thurman, John Travolta, right? Do you actually listen to a person, or are you waiting to talk? And Travolta admits that he's really just waiting to talk. So my friend wants to tell me her problems. I understand. And there's no one else in her life who can and will listen the way that I do. Now, I'm missing that from my own life. There is nobody, not even my spouse, who really wants to hear what it's like to be me and to have my experiences. I am the unsupported supporter. I am the unhelped helper. My life is one sided. Remember Superman? Is that 1980, 1979? Christopher Reeve, Margot Kidder, right? And she falls off the building and he zooms up and catches her. And he goes, "Don't worry, I've got you." And she looks around and goes, "You've got me? Who's got you?" These lectures are aimed at therapists, and I'm not complaining. I just suspect that you are in this same position of being the unsupported supporter, right? Because we've developed a set of skills and a way of being that just isn't common in the general population. And there is nobody who can be you for you, the way you are you for other people. For my friend's side, this seems fine. She gets help, she gets support, she needs that, okay? But one day she'll start to realize that her relationships are ultimately empty. Everyone knows her, but she doesn't really know anybody. She's transparent, everyone else is opaque. Now, after a long course of therapy, maybe a year, your clients might also start to realize this. Becoming more rounded people with less simple problems, they might start to take an interest in others as they ought. They take an interest in you. You're an important person in their life. And the more the therapist evades, the more obvious it becomes that the therapist does not trust the client. Something foundational is missing in this relationship: mutuality. In America, we use the word intimacy in a couple different ways because we're still, in some ways, puritanical Victorians. We sometimes mean sex. We use intimacy because we can't bear to say sex. But the social scientist and the relationship scientist means something else. We mean this: you tell me how you feel, and I listen and try to understand. Then I tell you how I feel, and you do the same for me. Intimacy is the sharing of confidences. The collecting of confidences, however, with no mutuality, is something else. You know, spying or voyeurism, maybe. Eventually, after a long time, when it's relevant, the refusal to share personal things with clients damages the relationship, damages their progress. We might have trust in them in the sense that, we believe they can make their own decisions, we believe they're safe, and so on, but we don't trust them by putting any load on the metaphorical bridge. I was trained to closely analyze and discount any feelings that I had for clients, to feel no affection, to stay disinterested, to ultimately detach and refrain from any real, actual human care. Not detach from goals, detach from care for the person. Um, the more that we care about people, the more damage that we endure. And so we develop this like psychoanalytic language of transference and countertransference where we can pretend we're not in a real relationship with this person who comes to us every week. Secondary trauma is real. Therapists get hurt doing therapy, absorbing the squalid, painful, dangerous facts of the lives of our clients. We need our own therapists, supervision. We need strategies for containment. But the existentialist does not detach. We allow ourselves to authentically care, not for the outcome, for the person. We allow ourselves to be moved. Part of that is mutuality. Are you anxious? Global warming continues unabated. In 30 years of raising awareness and trying to deal with the problem, the best we've managed to do is marginally decrease the rate at which we increase carbon emissions into the atmosphere. Around the world, democracy is collapsing, being replaced with fascism. We have war in Eastern Europe, recalling the days of World War II. Pandemic has cost 6.3 million lives on the official record that we can confirm, and most countries are too poor to look into every death. The real number is almost certainly many times 6.3 million deaths. In America, we have rising inflation, reordering of both our politics and our economy. Nothing is certain. Are you anxious? You'll be dead soon. You'll be dead soon, and nobody can go with you. Nobody can tell you what it will be like. There's no coming back. Before you die, you'll probably get sick and suffer for a long time first. And this is the fate of every living human. Everyone you love will get sick, suffer, and die. Are you anxious? Why not? Why not? What makes you so special? Rollo May in 1950 was really the first American psychological professional to suggest anxiety was functional rather than being merely a symptom. Uncle Siggy, Sigmund Freud, imagined anxiety arose from knowing that your actions don't match your values. The CBT people, cognitive behavior therapy people, imagine anxiety as a symptom of a mental illness to be eradicated. A product of erroneous thinking. Existentialists make different assumptions. We assume that anxiety arises from care and doubt. Driving to work, I have to teach 4 classes today. I care that I do a good job. And I know that I'm imperfect. The tendency to say the wrong thing at the wrong time. Therefore, I feel a little nagging anxiety. I get to work, I go to check my email. I don't want to. I don't want to click that button and find out what's hiding out. I care that I've done a good job. I care that I keep my job. And I know sometimes that there is bad news or unmeetable demands in the email. So, anxiety. Yeah. I'm one of the least complained about college professors, actually. But every 7 to 9 years, I get a complaint from a student, filtered through the administration. Yeah. More than that. Anxiety is not an event, a phenomenon. It's not something happening to us. It's not beamed in by passing spacecraft for no reason. We are our emotions as much as we are our thoughts. In fact, logical thoughts and words are just the activity of neural networks, the same as our emotions. Our emotional neural networks form the foundation for those linguistic and logical neural networks, more formal kinds of thinking. Doing away with your emotions like Spock on Star Trek does not make you more logical, it makes you less logical. because you have to ignore whole segments of information. You don't have anxiety. You are anxious. You are anxiety. As a branch, you could say, of humanism, our job in the therapy room is to unconditionally accept the client, to have unconditional positive regard for the client. And if you unconditionally accept somebody, that's counterthetical to trying to change them. Trying to change them is a rejection of part of them, one way of their being, a rejection of them. If I love you, then I love you when you're happy, but also when you're sad. I love you when you're polite or rude. I love you when you're attentive or distracted, calm or angry or anxious. Rejecting anxiety as a symptom to be annihilated means rejecting the person or attempting to annihilate part of them. Clients often present with anxiety as a symptom and want help doing away with it. I have this conversation with a lot of people. In the end, what my clients tend to want is inner peace. And nobody ever reaches a state of inner peace through self-aggression. And attempting to feel less anxious is ultimately self-aggression. At some point, the client eventually asks, how do I stop feeling anxious? And my answer is, well, when you figure that out, let me know. We'll bottle it. We'll sell it, right? We'll make $1 billion. I just don't know. I don't know how to be less anxious. I don't want to know. I do know how to be less anxious. Stop caring. Or have an undue level of confidence. I don't want to know. That's just not what we do here. Feeling anxious just is not what we do here. And my clients will say something like, that's not fair, you know? You don't know what it's like. You're not anxious. Come on, man. See above. I am anxious. I'm anxious about work. I'm anxious when the phone rings. I'm anxious when I see other human beings in public places, you know? I try to take a walk every day. I walk down to the park. If I see two other people half a mile away in the park, I turn around. Not today. Too crowded. I'm anxious at the grocery. I'm anxious when I'm driving. I haven't done away with my anxiety. I've become large. Yeah, large. Yeah, absolutely. No, inside I've become large metaphorically. So large that the anxiety is in there, the same as it ever was. And the anxiety is part of me, but it's no longer all or even most of me. There's room in there for other stuff, for other experience, for other ways of being. We all go around pretending not to be anxious. We put on a brave face because we have to, because it's expected, because there are display rules in our society. We fake confidence like it's a national religion. We smile, shake hands firmly. I'm Bob Baker, damn glad to meet you. We tell everyone we're okay. How are you? Fine. How are you? Fine. Sometimes we even believe it ourselves for a little while. Fake it till you make it. But everyone's anxious. Everyone sane is anxious. Scared, frustrated, angry, sad, mournful. We all have the full range of emotions that we keep covered up and bottled up. The therapy client is walking through this world where everyone has the mask on, you know? Everyone seems to have it together, And our client thinks they're the only one with problems, the only anxious one, the only worried one, the only one on the brink of a panic attack. They think they're sick, that they're weird, that they're an outlier, but in fact, they're just about perfectly normal. When my clients bring up their feelings, especially when they're wondering why everyone but them has it together, I give them a big, healthy dose of, yeah, me too. It doesn't seem like it, but right now we're talking about primary and secondary emotions. Anxiety about life is a primary emotion. It's healthy, it's normal, it can be integrated. Anxiety about anxiety is a secondary emotion. And here we have the client not just being anxious, but worrying that they're too anxious, or being anxious that anxiety will ruin their performance at work or in love, or worrying that they're missing out because of anxiety. And all this stuff can cause us to push anxiety away, to reject anxiety, to try not to feel it. Medication, drugs, risky sex, all the things that we do to calm down and stop feeling. Normalizing is a great way to cut through all of those secondary emotions and get to the primary emotion. Yeah, man, me too. Look, everyone's sane is anxious. Tell me what it's like. Tell me what it's like to be anxious right now, here with me. Ethics, yeah, of course. Our job is to listen. Our job is to accompany the client through their experience. As the unhelped helper, it's not impossible. I might be tempted to lean on a client because I need someone to lean on, and that would be unethical. We always consider the needs of the client. Sometimes, genuinely, what the client needs is to be trusted, but this is very tricky ground, even dangerous ground, you know? Carl Jung was not alone in having sexual relationships with his clients. You go back to the middle of the 20th century, and it seems like psychologists and psychiatrists viewed their client pool as a dating resource. You know, a famous gay psychoanalyst had sex with some of his male patients because they felt so down about themselves being gay in a cis het world. Um, he thought their self esteem would improve if he demonstrated through loving affection that they were worthy of love and affection. And that, of course, is bull crap. It's exploitation. We're in a position of trust, and there are lines. There are lines. Here's the thing: is that it can be very difficult to separate your needs from your client's needs. It's very easy to rationalize the thing that you want to do without looking very closely at why you want to do it. But telling people not to just isn't very effective. You know? Having a rule in a rule book that says don't do thing doesn't really make people stop doing thing. There are plenty of psychologists and psychiatrists in prison right now for using their clients sexually. It's much more effective to teach people to think through the problem, to do a kind of stakeholder ethics where we contemplate all of the possible good and all of the possible harm that could come from a course of action. And when it comes to sex with clients, it is always 100% of the time harmful in the long run for the client. It's always exploitation. Which doesn't mean we should never self-disclose. We should carefully think through self-disclosure and the reasons for that self-disclosure. So I'm proposing 4 levels of self-disclosure. Other famous people have proposed different levels and fewer levels. Rollo May starts with Rollo May and Irv Yalom, if I'm not mistaken. Both start with process comments as a kind of self-disclosure, but process comments are really what's going on in therapy rather than what's going on with me. So I'm going to say level 1, the lowest and most common level, is I feel blank when you blank. I feel devalued when you're late for therapy. There we go. Might not be a thing I say on day 1. Might be a thing that I say on day 10 after we've had lots of conversations about the client being late. And I might never say it. There might be some real reason that we can't work around, or there's a power dynamic that I don't want to feed into, but sometimes I might need to say, I feel devalued when you're late. This kind of self-disclosure is going to be relatively uncommon. But the deeper we go, the more we're at level 4, not level 1, the more that's true. You'll almost never do a level 4 disclosure. You'll more commonly do a level 1 disclosure, and that only after some careful reflection on what that is for. What is that about? So here we're reacting emotionally to a client's emotions. And it might just be that I'm stating the emotion. It might be that I'm reflecting the emotion, right? Sometimes my job is not to make the client feel better. Sometimes my job is to cry with the client, and that is a kind of disclosure. One of the most important moments in my own therapy, I was talking with my analyst about my father's funeral and how I had been totally unable to cry despite the urge to do so at my father's funeral. And I told it like a robot. At the end of the story, I look up and I see my therapist is crying. He's weeping. Even now, that brings something up in me. And I didn't feel anything in particular at the time. And I said, Stephen, why are you crying? He says, I'm crying because you can't. I'm crying for you. That was an incredibly important self-disclosure. It was the man letting his feelings out. He didn't say, I feel sad when you tell the story. He showed me his grief that I should have been feeling. Incredibly important. That's what I needed. That's what I needed. Another person, a client, wounded herself in a fit of impotent rage. She grabbed, not in front of me, at a different time, she with her long fingernails grabbed her cheek and punctured it, and had to go to the doctor and get stitches, and showed up with a big patch, and she showed me what's under with the horrible wound. And asked what had happened. She told me she'd done this to herself, and I said, Maya, if someone else had done this to you, I'd feel very angry towards them. But you did this to you. And I feel this anger towards you because you don't deserve that. You don't deserve to be hurt in this way, even if you're the one doing it. And she reported that as a turning point in her experience. So at level two, we might start talking about the immediate relationship in the room. One client was boring. We might have talked about her in a previous thing. She just talked about her husband like all the time. And I worked on her and worked on her and worked on her. And eventually one day in therapy, she says, I feel, she tells me a feeling that she's having, now in the moment. And so at the end, I told her, this session, I felt closer to you than usual because you talked about an immediate thing instead of just this story about people and events outside of the room. And at points in that person's therapy, once the relationship was established, once we were past 10 sessions, past 20 sessions, I would say, I feel bored right now. I'm having trouble tracking what it is that you're saying because it's about people and events that aren't here in front of us now. And then things would get back into immediacy. Right? So that would be a level 2 kind of disclosure. Less common than a level 1 kind of disclosure. It's more personal. It's more dangerous, and it's even more directive, which is a thing that we would tend to eschew. So level 3 would be the sharing of experiences. And this is where most people start to balk. Indeed, you should start to balk. It would be quite uncommon that the sharing of experiences were categorically necessary in a therapy room. But sometimes there's a client who just is unable to trust because they can't imagine you could have empathy for their experience. I did a fair amount of work with soldiers experiencing post-traumatic stress, but more specifically guilt, moral injury. And they would come to the edge of telling me the thing that happened, but the thing that happened was they had done something. And they couldn't quite trust I could handle the blood and the guts and the gore and the very powerful emotion that they were holding back. But they also couldn't quite trust that I could still have faith in them when they had disclosed the thing. And so it became important for them to know that, man, you haven't done anything worse than I've done. I have my own moral injuries. We don't have to get terribly deep into it. That's not what we're here for. But I have my own shit. And you haven't seen anything worse than I've seen. Come on. Let's go. Let's get into it. So I'd be level 3. The disclosure, right, of experiences that can make room for the hardest stuff to happen. Very, very uncommon that we would need to. Maybe more common in substance abuse. I don't do substance abuse counseling, but the people from AA like to say only a drunk can help a drunk. I don't happen to believe that. I think that you have to have gone through something. You have to have struggled with something. It doesn't have to have been substance abuse, but you have to have worked your way out of some hole. But they will tell you directly often that only if you have substance abuse problems can you be of help. Can you have empathy for people with substance abuse problems? And so that might be a time where very early actually in the process you do those disclosures. And level four uh, might just be the volunteering of real and of relevant experiences. Sometime deep into a 2 or 3 or 4 year process, the client has started to notice that they show up once a week and they deliver all of their problems, all of their emotional content for you to hold. And you do all of the holding and they do none of the holding, and that is unequal. That's a power imbalance. That's not a real relationship. And sometimes it's necessary to take that next step and develop the relationship into something more useful. Yes, still within the parameters and the boundaries of a therapeutic relationship. But they can't progress any further until we're trusting them in the way that they're trusting us. And so sometimes it might be necessary and fruitful and appropriate. The client comes in and says, "Well, how are you?" And we don't just deflect it. Right? My back really hurts today. I've noticed that my client notices that I have chronic back pain. My back really hurts today. I'm okay. Don't worry very much about me. I got this back pain, saving someone's life actually from not in a dramatic event, but a person of disability, developmental disability with pneumonia, and I had to keep him up and walking because it took usually a week to convince the doctor they had pneumonia and get them the antibiotics that they needed. And they had they had limited strength and no balance, and so that meant walking them with a gait belt, and I just tore up my back, and so I feel it, and it hurts, but it's meaningful, and I'm okay. That's what's going on with me today. What's going on with you today? And now they have a thing that they can hold. The relationship is mutual. It's appropriately intimate. Day one, absolutely not. Day 100, yeah, maybe. If so, there's just a story. So there is this story. It comes out of the psychiatric hospital. I don't know where I picked it up in the various reading I did for my doctorate, so I can't credit it. Apologies. And it's probably apocryphal anyway. And apocryphal, if you're not a student of languages, apocryphal is Latin for bullcrap. It's probably apocryphal. But the psychiatrist is walking a patient to a medical appointment on the grounds. The patient experiences catatonic schizophrenia. They have no volition, they do no volitional movements, and so they need to be guided almost forcefully, right? So the psychiatrist has an arm around them and is leading them and pushing them into every step and being very reassuring, and the client is hunched over and the psychiatrist is beside them, pushing them along across the grounds. Cloud cover forms as they're walking, and snow starts to fall. And by the time they're done at the medical appointment, it's time to walk back. There's snow and ice on the ground. The patient is relatively young and healthy and fit, but the psychiatrist is an elderly doctor with dress shoes, not suitable for walking around outside on the ice, and start to walk back in this position. But as we go further and the wind picks up, and the sleet and the snow, and the psychiatrist has to start to lean on the patient. The patient has never been leaned on. The patient has been the recipient of care, has been held, has not held anyone. And as we go, the patient starts to take on the role of the person holding. And by the time we get back to the unit, the patient is upright with an arm around the doctor, guiding them, holding them up, keeping their balance. It, of course, doesn't last, it's not a cure, but it's a thing that happens. Relationships should be mutual. Have you been trained to detach from your clients? Have you been trained to never disclose anything to your clients, to sit behind them where they can't see you, never reveal an emotion, never react? What does it mean to hear something different now? Okay, bye.